Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Susan Posnock, and I'm the Director of Public Affairs and Education for Jewelers of America. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler and Jewelers of America's co-branded webinar series. Today, I'm joined by National Jewelers Editor-in-Chief Michelle Graff, who will lead today's discussion, The Lab-Grown Diamond Market, Where Are We Now? Our guests today for this discussion are Edahn Golan, Co-Managing Director at Tradeups, Avi Levy, North America President at International Gemological Institute, and Sherry Smith, Director of Business Development and Strategy at the Edge Retail Academy. Before we get the webinar started, I just wanted to let attendees know that if they have a question, they can type it into the Zoom Q&A box. I'll be back at the end of the discussion to share the questions. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler and Jewelers of America websites in the coming days. Now we'll get the discussion started, and I'll be back to field any questions you have during the discussion at the end. Thank you. Take it away, Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this completely non-controversial discussion on lab-grown diamonds. I know Susan just gave a brief introduction for our guests today, Sherry, Edahn, and Avi, but I want to take a minute for each of them to kind of introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what their companies do. I know Sherry and Edahn, your companies both gather data, and I think everyone would like a little bit more background on how exactly you gather it and what exactly we're talking about when we're talking about your data. So Sherry, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, so I work for the Edge Retail Academy. We are a consulting company as well as a data aggregator. We gather the data directly from our clients or our retail partners' POS systems and pull it in. So we currently aggregate between a little over $3 billion in aggregated jewelry. And again, we have a team of consultants who work with retailers on helping them to improve their business. And we also have a data share program for vendors in the industry.
Okay, Edahn.
At Tradeups, we also collect data from jewelry retailers. Unlike Sherry, we kind of take it in a different direction. We supply that data to non-retailers with the intention of helping them understand the market better and supply more accurately, manage their programs. That's one aspect. The other aspect is we provide analysis to those who want to learn more about the diamond industry.
Okay, and Avi?
Hi, I am the president of IGI North America. We are a diamond jewelry gemstone grading laboratory. We've got 30 locations worldwide. Simply put, we are here to tell the industry as well as the end consumer the balls and strikes of the merchandise that they buy at the retail locations. So we give full grading reports, we give appraisals. We simply want to be that outlet that tells you what you are buying.
Okay. All right. Thank you and welcome again. Okay. So as I mentioned, we're here to talk about one of the hottest topics in the industry today, lab-grown diamonds. So I want to start with a little background. From your perspective, when did sales of lab-grown diamonds really begin to pick up steam among consumers? Like, I've been at National Jeweler since late 2007, and my kind of earliest memories, and I'm going to date myself here, I remember probably 2008, 2009, Gemesis was the big name in lab-grown diamonds, and they were growing yellows, and then they were going to grow pinks, and then the kind of mass production of colorless white lab-grown diamonds, however you want to call them, kind of came later. But when do you feel like they really started to pick up, when they really started to grab consumers' attention? Was it around 2018 when De Beers introduced Lightbox? Edahn, what do you think?
I think it was before that. Go ahead.
Sherry?
Go ahead. You go first.
We started to see in our data in 2016 lab-grown sales. That's the point, I think, where it stopped being a conversation and something that some jewelers started to keep on hand. But the real turning point came at the height of COVID, when people started to buy, when the whole way of buying lab-grown really changed. But definitely the third turning point was when De Beers sort of legitimized it by entering the field.
Okay, Sherry?
Yeah, so for us as a consulting company, we obviously speak to the retailers, and I would say it's around 2015 to 16, we actually saw retailers introducing lab-grown as a bridal option. And in fact, we worked with a company called NPD with data share for a while, and some entities who saw it or looking at the data and reviewing it noticed lab-grown was starting to grow and capture a little bit market share. And I think at first, the first reaction was, that can't be real. That number has to be inaccurate. And so it was happening before the 2018 launch, I think, of Lightbox.
Interesting. Avi, and I mean, from your perspective, I mean, you can talk about when your IGI started seeing more lab-grown diamonds come in for grading, because that's certainly a tell about the market.
Sure. I think initially IGI first spotted in 2005 in Belgium when they received a parcel of mixed goods. And because of the technology that we had, our systems were able to pick up on it. And leadership at that point knew right away that if it's going to start somewhere small, it's definitely going to grow. And it did. Like you said, yes, it started with probably inferior qualities at the time because it was a beginning. And as it matured and grew over the years, it made its way to retail. I'm going to say before I came to IGI in 2019, probably 2017, 18, there were programs already being put together at some retailers. But it probably didn't hit steam until 2018-19, when many more, I think, retailers saw that there was a value proposition that they had to put out there to their consumers. And obviously some vendors already started to invest and put together machines and strategies and all that, seeing at the beginning of the whole process. So yeah, probably 2017-18 is probably fair to say.
So now it's 2023. Sherry, you mentioned in your answer that, your numbers started telling you something around 2016, 2017. So that's what I want to talk today about. Basically, we're talking here about numbers, like how many lab-grown diamonds are being sold and what are they being sold for. So let's break this down into two segments. Number one, lab-grown diamonds for bridal. So we're talking engagement rings and wedding bands. And then second segment, lab-grown diamonds for what we call fashion jewelry, which is basically the category we use to refer to everything that's not bridal jewelry, not an engagement ring. So let's start with bridal. What does the data currently tell us about how many consumers are choosing lab-grown diamonds over natural for their engagement rings currently? And Sherry, I'll start with you. What does the Edge data show us?
So I looked at loose data, just loose, right?
Loose diamond data.
Yeah, loose diamonds, earth mined versus lab-grown. And units sold for lab-grown are up 74%. Units sold for natural are up 33%. So we are seeing that they're being sold. And it is funny when we engage in conversations at the trade shows and stuff, how different the perspectives are. I would say it is continuing to grow. I'll defer to Edahn on the fashion because ours isn't quite that granular yet. We measure loose and diamond engagement rings, but we don't break down the lab-grown fashion, which I think is getting bigger and bigger. But what we have noticed in the data too, it's capturing more market share. There's a decline in average retail sale in both of them. And I think it would shock people to know year to date, it's a 35% decline right now in average retail sale for both earth mined and lab-grown. But all we talk about are the lab-grown, coming down in the average retail sale. And again, as I said, we have retailers who've embraced lab-grown years ago. And, they positioned it properly in their stores. They didn't, try to disguise the idea that you could come in and trade it later or any of that. They sold it as it was. We can't guarantee what the market will be 2 years from now, 5 years from now, but they've grown their bridal departments in a huge way. So when I look at those, it's really captured a percentage of their sales. It's still small relative to the natural diamonds. I'm sure Edahn can speak more to this, but it is growing and it is continuing to capture market share.
Okay. Edahn, what do you have in your figures for us?
So if I look at a combination of wedding bands, wedding sets, engagement rings, semi-mounts, and loose collectively, because most loose goes into engagement rings, we see a unit share of year to date 27%. The rest being 73% being natural diamonds, and that is a very, very large growth. This is once again units, not value. Value is kind of tricky because It's constantly declining. So it's moving, in both directions at the same time. But units, so just what I accounted for, we're looking at a 60% rise year over year in the first 8 months of the year.
And that's year to date, you said, Edahn, right?
Yeah, so this is up to August.
Which is significant.
It's insane. I mean, at the same time, we're looking at a decline of 17% in natural sales. Now, a decline for natural sales kind of makes sense because, there are less weddings this year. But at the same time, that means that there's also cannibalization.
The more people are picking lab-grown diamonds. We're going to get to that in a second, the why and the how. But Avi, I wondered if you had any
perspective. We should also talk about the price and the size.
Yes.
Those two are
price and the size, yeah.
If
So
you have
at
any
IGI
stats from the lab perspective.
Well, barring exact number stats, I'll just give you kind of a general overview. So right in the jewelry business, we all know it's a natural evolution. It all starts in loose and it has to end up in some kind of jewelry. It was easy to start with solitaires in the lab-grown sector and studs and basic solitaires and things like that. We're seeing a big shift to fashion, be it necklaces, bracelets, and we're even hearing about vendors now proposing more total weight programs of rings and other kind of fashion jewelry. And that's a natural progression, right? It has to happen that way for a jewelry sector to continue. So it does seem that the consumer continues to pull for it. But saying that, natural is still fighting, surviving. We still get a lot of calls, not just from vendors, but also on our appraisal side. We're seeing a lot of business come our way for natural diamond jewelry appraisals. So is it down? Yes, it's down. But it's definitely still there and fighting. We are seeing a difference in price points. Yes, the natural price points are going higher. And as Edahn and everybody said, lab-grown is dwindling, right? We don't know where that's going to go to. But what I'd like to see, what I'm seeing rather, and I'm happy to see, is that the two lanes are forming, right? The consumer is coming to the doorstep and they're saying, I want lab-grown or I want natural. So that's forming. And I think our retailers have to also kind of be prepared for that as well. Because right now sales are surging in lab-grown. Yes, the prices are attractive and all that. But natural diamonds still have that allure and customers are still pushing for that as well. That's what we see.
Interesting. So Avi, Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to note in the comments, we had somebody who mentioned that they, also got on board with lab-grown early. Their store is in Columbus, Ohio, and they had a program back in 2017. But somebody also mentioned the story about the jeweler who sold lab-grown as natural. And just to share for a moment, to pause and share the fact that there is different lanes for these products, and from the Jewelers of America perspective, stay in your lane in terms of what you're actually selling. And I think that's the thing that we try and tell our members and emphasize the most. And obviously it's a growing product category and a legitimate product category.
Right.
But it's critical as we see stories like that come out. Both sides of both lanes will be damaged by people not being honest about what they're selling. And just wanted to emphasize that, but sorry to interrupt, Michelle, go on.
No, can I jump in on that for a second? Because we're also seeing a lot more requests and from us to literally screen natural diamonds to make sure that lab-grown is not mixed. And it started with the Mellies because that one was coming on, but we're seeing it now in larger sizes as well. So we're keeping an eye out for it. We're working with growers to see their technology, to see if they're differing. We're working with a lot of natural diamond companies here in the city to make sure that their inventory is clean and it is what it's supposed to be. We're also working with other corporations and organizations to set up standards for screening. So I think going forward, that's going to be very important to make sure that the goods you're supposed to get are the goods you're supposed to get. So.
Yeah, I would also point out that I think these are stories to be aware of, and that's why we reported on it. I actually wrote that story and I just dropped it in the chat for anyone that wants to take a glance. But I don't think that represents the market as a whole or jewelers' actions as a whole. No matter what kind of product you have in any kind of market, there are going to be people who are dishonest who try to take advantage of it. But I don't think it's representative of the whole market. And
definitely not.
yeah. So I just want to
It's a
note
much
that
smaller
obviously
issue than it used to be
Yes.
5 years ago, 4 years ago.
You said it's a less of an issue. I didn't hear you.
Yes, it's much less of an issue. Combination of detection, awareness, and the legitimization of lab grown, making it
its own legitimate product
kosher
instead of
vendor.
something
True.
you want to
It's-
sub in to try to fool people. It can just be sold as its own legitimate product.
Right. It's the
Yeah.
maturing of that market. But
Yeah.
there are concerns now for larger goods. I mean, we are getting people who send us parcels of halves and 3-grainers that we didn't see before where they were worried. So it's just something to bring up there. We could talk about it another time, but it's something that we should know.
There's so many
But Avi,
facets to this
you brought-
discussion.
Avi, you brought up another interesting point, and that is the differentiation between bridal and fashion. At first, in the early days, the feeling was that lab grown will be a fashion sort of thing, and the higher end bridal will be only natural diamonds, and it won't, and the two won't mix. And
That
what
was
we're
De Beers
seeing is
dream.
Yeah.
not the case anymore.
Right.
Before we move on, I want to talk for a minute before we move on to fashion jewelry that Edahn just mentioned. I want to talk a little bit about Sherry, Edahn, and Avi, you might have input on this too. What are the conversations going on at retail? Like, why are people choosing lab-grown diamonds? And I think this is an important point of differentiation because I think there's a lot of discussion out there. And I also want to talk a little bit about this issue of value. I have a lot of thoughts around this. People bring up all the time, oh, they won't be worth anything. The prices are falling. But what are the discussions? Why are people picking lab-grown diamonds? I mean, for me, I think the main catalyst would probably be, I'm a young girl getting engaged. I want a 2-carat engagement ring. Like for some reason, 2 carats is just, it's what I want. It's what my friends have. It's, that's what you're stuck on. And you look at the price of a natural 2-carat diamond, you look at the price of lab grown, and you say to yourself, the lab grown is so much cheaper. I could have money left over to spend on my honeymoon or put into savings or put towards a down payment on a house or a car or something.
You touched all the important points.
Is
No,
that
seriously.
everything?
So
Is
this
it
is the
just
driver.
price?
It's affordability and practicality. I mean, I think consume, and which will surprise people. And again, we deal with so much of the front line. It's all demographics. It's not just people getting engaged who are buying lab grown. And I think when I go to the trade shows and I hear the conversation and there's these perspectives of, well, it's only engagement rings and this, it's not true. Baby boomers are buying it because she can buy 4-carat total weight earring studs and still go on that exotic vacation, and she doesn't feel like she's giving something up, even though they have more disposable income than, say, a young couple getting married at a young age in rural, Kansas. So I think it is affordability. I think it's practicality, and they see it as something they can add to their wardrobe and enjoy it. And again, we're seeing it across all demographics. I don't know, what Edahn thinks or Avi thinks, but that's what we're seeing in the data.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I'm seeing. So first of all, the marrying age in the United States is 28 for women and 30 for men. So we're talking millennials, okay? Millennials are heavy in debt. They're still heavy in debt from student loans. They are facing a large expense in the form of a wedding. They are facing a smaller, but yet still a pricey expense in the form of the honeymoon. And they're facing a very large expense in the form of buying their first home, which in the United States is where that's where you start economically. And
I would also just jump in here real quick, Edahn. I would also say this is another factor. Childcare in the United States is exorbitantly expensive. And there's a lot
absolutely.
of discussion about that now. And I think that's also a consideration. But anyway,
but
everything here is
day,
expensive. But
at the end of the day, the US market in general is a very, very price sensitive market. As opposed to, say, Asia, when we're talking about jewelry, it's a very value oriented market. So in Asia, India, China, people buy gold because it's a store, it's literally a store of value. They know what they're buying, they know for how much they can sell, and it's a very tradable sort of commodity. In the United States, people buy, there's a big thing about price and there's a big thing about size. So getting a bigger diamond is definitely a thing. Getting sort of the same but different, so you may take your grandmother's engagement ring and replace the diamond. But there's also the issue of that you touched on with value. So true, there's a value thing, but let's take this apart for a moment.
Oh, please. I'm
And
dying
Sherry,
to know this.
too bad Mr. Smith is not around to back me on this, but I think he will. Nobody in their right mind sells a natural diamond to be married couple saying, God forbid, one day you get divorced, this thing has value. I mean, it's the dumbest selling proposal. So to
And
say that there's value is
they do it. It drives me crazy. They
Really?
absolutely, that's part of the biggest argument right now around lab-grown. It's not going to be worth anything.
At this point, I'm going to stop drinking coffee and move to cold water.
It
Look,
makes me crazy.
But here's the thing. And it's funny because, I'm hearing this mostly out of Miami, of all places, but it's happening in other places as well. Think about trade-ups, right? You walk into a store. Traditionally, you walk into a store. You look at you want to replace the diamond in your engagement ring because now you have a little bit more money. You're ahead of your, I don't know, 20th, 30th anniversary. And the jeweler will say to you, I can give you, I don't know, $1,000 on that stone. I'm just throwing a number, right? And you have a budget of $2,000. So now you have a $3,000 to buy a new stone. And what happens is that you get a diamond and you pay and that's it. And you trade it and you don't see that diamond anymore. What we're starting to see in the past year is that people walk into a store and it's interesting and they'll say, I want to trade up. But I want to replace my stone, but I don't want to trade up. I don't want to trade. I want to buy for those same budget, right? So the same $2,000, a very nice, very large or a much larger diamond. And we're not talking about $2,000, it's usually around $3,000, $4,000. But I want to keep my old diamond. And I want to make a pendant out of it. Now think about the psychology involved in this. First of all, you're saying to yourself, I know that if I put in a lab-grown diamond in this, I will never get that, proverbial $1,000 down the line. It's lost. So I'd rather keep the money to myself. So I'm not trading in my diamond. A. B, there's no belief in the value. You don't care about the value. And C, that finally saying it's all about size and price. So at the end of the day, those are the mechanics involved in this business. And then the question is, as an industry, what does lab-grown want to do in the long term? Because if the only thing you can do is sell a product that is constantly declining in price, not value, in price, then you're in a very problematic industry. You didn't see that in the phone industry. You didn't see that in the PC industry. You didn't see that in any other electronics area, which is what we need to compare it to, GPSs, whatever it is, cameras. At the end of the day, there is a bottom line, and the only way to fight declining prices is by adding features.
But we did see it in the electronics, Edahn.
Pardon?
We did see it in the electronics. I mean, once upon a time when you wanted a PC, only certain homes could afford to get it, and it was upwards of $3,000 to $4,000. Now the average home can all have a laptop or PC.
Absolutely, but they're not selling. But IBM, et cetera, or Dell are not selling it at cost plus. Right? You're looking at $1,000 product, any which way you look at it, and the only excuse to keep it at $1,000, even though your efficiencies are improving, is by adding features. Right. Faster, smarter, with
memory,
more designs, more trendy.
Diamonds, the only thing you can do is reach decolor, flawless clarity.
Right.
Then it's just a matter of size. And who's going to walk around with a diamond this big? I mean, there's a limit to that as well.
Michelle, can I speak to the investment part? Because that's
yes, I think this is really important.
Edahn's exactly right that nobody should be selling that way. But that's probably the biggest argument that's being made, at least in the US right now, is it's not going to be worth anything. You're not going to be able to trade it. It's an investment. And now you're not going to be able to. But that's, first of all, retailers sell that way, which is a mistake. And the very retail or couple they sold it to that did unfortunately get divorced and walk back in, they're not offering them what they paid as an investment. They're like, oh, we'll take that in on consignment. And here's what, I hope I'll be able to give you, which is close to wholesale or less. So it's never an investment. This was supposed to always be an emotional purchase. We've commoditized it in the US. with all these new tools and so forth. I'd rather see you go back to an emotional purchase. Then as Susan said, you can stay in your lane, but you can have both lanes. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. Your retail environment can tell both stories. That's just my opinion.
No, I think that's a great point. I want to ask a quick question here before we move on to talk a little bit about non-bridal jewelry, because I'm curious about this segment of the market as well. What do we think of, I think from my perspective, one of the big marketing lines that the lab-grown diamond companies use is that it's green, and greener than earth mine diamonds. How much do consumers care about this? Like how much of this selling proposition is you wrapped up in people being like, I've read about these, and we've had a lot of people in their comments saying the millennials and the Gen Zers are very, they're well informed. There's good information on the internet about this, and bad information, but good information as well. And how much is this green aspect playing into this purchase decision? Like in my opinion, I think it's like 90% price, but I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that. Avi, do you want to jump in?
No, I think initially it is about price, as we said. The whole green side of this story is growing. I think it's growing because a lot of the producers who might say they are green are not, and they're being called out on it. Lab-grown is still growing, though. I mean, this is a sector that's still growing. I think that a lot of producers want to become greener and more sustainable, and they want to make a product that speaks to that side of things. But like anything else, it takes a lot of dedication and discipline for that to happen.
And it also to be honest, it takes a lot of money. And if you have a product where the price is declining, and it costs all this money to make your facility solar powered and treat wastewater responsibly, et cetera,
then why?
How viable is that going to be?
No, good, true statement. That's for us to see. But on the initial side, if they want to, yes, then you have to put your money down and do it. I think we are more aware of the people who are not, and trying to make that stop. But like I said before about people switching goods, we're going to have those people who try to come to market saying they are something they're not. We've got to have better policing involved. Is it important to a consumer? Well, it's important in a lot of different areas of consumables out there. So, of course, it's coming to our side, I think. We're getting calls. People are asking us. We don't have all the answers, but when we know, we answer. When we know that a facility has been granted the sustainability standard, we'll back it as well. But until then, we're going to stay away from that.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see some, and we just saw it in Europe, they're going to see some rules coming down the pike about all these terms that are kind of thrown around loosely, green and eco-friendly, and all of, right now the FTC is working on updating its green guides. We just saw this happen in Europe where they've outlawed a couple of terms, responsibly sourced, all this kind of general stuff that's used a lot, but doesn't really mean a lot and isn't really backed up. So Avi, that's a really good point. I think consumers are starting to care more about the impact their products have. I mean, especially after, in the United States this summer we just had with floods and fires. I think it's really coming home to a lot of people. And I think it's going to be more of a factor going forward. Sherry, did you want to say something?
Well, it's called greenwashing, right? When the companies are saying they actually are and they're not doing anything. But forgive me for not looking this up beforehand, but there is a lab-grown company that's already completely solar panel. So I think that's fantastic.
Oh, it's happening.
Yeah, it's happening. And the thing is with millennials and Gen Zs, if you read anything about those demographics, they do care more about the planet and what's being left to them, right? And they're also more tolerant of so many things, of people and inclusivity. So these things matter to them more than they do, say, baby boomers, where we were a little bit, that was a little bit more me generation and keeping up with the Jones. It was just a different philosophy. So I do think, and one of the things we see retailers doing more and more of is having charitable events or tying themselves to a charity because millennials and Gen Zs care about that. So it'll be interesting, I think, to continue to see what happens. And I do think they need guidelines. I completely agree with Avi, that so that you can't just say it and not be doing it.
I just wanted to jump in.
Most of the growers are green to a certain extent.
Right.
Those, some more, some less. There are a lot of initiatives that are both propelled by the government, but also introduced. Surat is very sunny, so that's an option.
Take advantage
as well. is also using solar power. But at the end of the day, the question is not only if lab-grown is green, but how green, what's happening in manufacturing, which is not green, doesn't matter what you're polishing. And then, at the end of the day, we're all generating energy one way or another. We're all using energy one way or another. So the offset is kind of an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think an argument can always be made, and this is a separate subject, that the truly green option is recycled diamonds that are pre-owned, already done, already cut and polished, already here in the market. And I'm surprised we actually don't see a bigger push for that, because this is a huge push in the area of clothing. There's so many companies now doing resale. I just ordered a kit from a company called Tradeups, where they're going to take some of my old, they send you a bag, you send them your old clothes and they try to sell them for you. And if they don't sell them for you, they find some kind of allegedly find some kind of way to reuse them. But I think this whole idea of circular fashion and using what already exists is gaining steam. But that's a separate discussion from lab-grown diamonds.
But it's a very important thing in Europe today, and it's just a matter of time until we see this, both in the United States on the business side and on the consumer as well.
I want to move on really quick. So I want to talk about fashion jewelry now. We've kind of been stuck on bridal. So how much of the market for stud earrings, tennis bracelets, et cetera, is currently going to lab-grown diamonds? Edahn, do you have figures on this? Sherry, I think you said your figures don't break down that specifically.
Right now, we have diamonds as whole categories with the exception of loose. We're working on getting it more granular, but I think Edahn does have more granular.
Yeah, so if I look at fashion, we're looking at just 8%, just 5% year to date. If you want to look at specific items, I'm just going through my database. Stud earrings, that was the question?
Stud earrings, tennis bracelets, like any kind of jewelry that's not, I don't know if that's too broad, but jewelry that is not intended for engagement rings and wedding bands. Okay,
so studs are 13%. Talk about other earring shapes, styles. Hoops, just 2%. Fashion is what is classified as fashion, so it's other shapes, other styles. 6%. Dangles are 1.5%. So not a big deal. If we look at bracelets, so tennis bracelets where there are a lot of diamonds, you would expect there will be a big share. It's 8%.
What about necklaces?
Necklaces.
Overall necklaces is 2%.
Wow, because we're seeing more necklaces coming, I'd say.
Pendants.
Us too, Avi.
Nope,
Too, in the
not pendants. To me, studs and pendants are always been termed not fashion, right? Because they're basics, we'll call them. To me, it's the necklaces. It's the tennis
necklace. Is that right?
Fashion
that's
rings
what we're saying. Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, for pendants we have 3%. I mean, I'm rounding here numbers, 3.3,
yeah.
But it doesn't matter. It's 3.
But I think those are all gaining popularity. Like we're seeing it come into the inventories now, and as there's more and more programs being put together. Before, the emphasis I think was primarily bridal.
Yes.
So now there's all kinds of and really gorgeous product out there.
Well, and from a trend perspective, these tennis necklaces and tennis bracelets are huge right now, and people like to wear multiples and they like to layer them. So if that's a look you're going for, I mean, obviously it's not going to cost you a lot less in lab grown than it is a natural.
True.
So Edahn, it sounds like for your numbers that stud earrings seem to be kind of the main focus for fashion jewelry for non-bridal, which is interesting. And I've heard that too, that people are coming in and saying, I really want, 4-carat total weight studs or 4 carats in each ear. And so what are you going to go for? As you mentioned, Edahn, it's all about size here in the US.
Many years ago.
What's that?
I don't go with earrings anymore. I took mine out many years ago. Some of you might remember earrings, but at the end of the day, so it's actually interesting to talk about stud earrings, because stud earrings is the place where we first saw the big transformation into lab grown. So up until COVID, the purchasing habits were very similar for both. The breakdown by shapes, the breakdown by size, GHIs, et cetera, pretty much identical. During COVID, people all of a sudden, I think we spoke about it in a previous discussion, that all of a sudden we started to see people buying bigger and bigger stud earrings. And then we started to see that these stud earrings have lab grown in it. So basically, it's the Zoom era, right? So, you don't buy a ring if you want to show, you don't buy a bracelet, you buy stud earrings. And, if you don't have a beard, you'll actually see it. And I think that the fact that there's a camera and a screen between you and the person on the other side gave you the opportunity to overcome the feeling of, it's kind of fake, but they won't really notice because they don't really see it up close. And I think that was where the barrier was broken. And after that, it was just, you see that everything changed. The sizes, the color, the clarity, the color and clarity, but also the color clarity combinations, shapes. I mean, whatever you name it, and it's a different market in almost any way you can imagine.
Interesting. So here's two more questions left before we move into questions. I know we've had a lot coming into this chat and Susan has been keeping an eye on those. So do we think that, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do we think the market for lab grown diamonds for both bridal and fashion jewelry is going to continue to grow?
Yes.
Seems that way.
Can't put the genie back in the bottle.
You can't put, that's good.
And how would you characterize, here's the last question, how would you characterize the industry's acceptance or lack thereof as lab-grown diamonds as a legitimate product?
Who do you want to start with?
I just
Avi.
want to know in the chat, there was a
You
lot
want
of conversation
You want the
about
Rappaport shooting
Rappaport. So,
range, or?
sorry.
Too much on that one. You can't stop it. It is here. That's done. So I think it's about looking forward. Like we said before, it's 2 lanes being set up. It's time to accept it. There are customers for both. The US is going through a transition right now. We will come out of it. I think in 6 months, we're going to have a different conversation, hopefully on numbers. Lab growns will continue, but I'm also thinking that natural is going to come back as well. That's who set the table. So they are going to continue to grow there as well. They'll come back, and we'll continue to see these 2 lanes growing.
Avi, do you think this $20 million De Beers is pouring into Seize the Day and bringing back a diamond forever is going to have an impact on the natural market? Is that why you think naturals are going to come back?
I think it's a beginning. It's a great step. I think they coming back to, they did some very good things for the market when they were involved in this way. They're coming back in. Where it's going to go, we'll see. It's a beginning. So yes, we are hoping that it's going to bring back, it's going to bring that customer back. So it's all about marketing, right? Even back to what we were saying about retailers now going further with their lab grown. They have to be more savvy. The vendors have to be more savvy now with their offerings as well, right? We can't just live and die by bridals, studs, and solitaires. Either the market will evolve or it'll be in a corner of just some basics. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to continue to grow.
Yeah, I remember I interviewed an analyst once who was telling me that he thought the future of a big portion of the future of lab grown diamond is going to be specialty cuts and colors, like things you would do that you would not do with natural because of the price. Cut it in the shape of a cat. If you're someone,
we just need the vendors to catch up.
The vendors have to catch up to all these ideas. Rounds? They should be making skulls.
Right,
Skulls.
Custom cutting things into shapes people want that you wouldn't do with natural because maybe in 6 years or a year or 2 years you're not going to want that, but it's fun for now and you're willing to drop a couple $100 on it. I think that's an interesting proposition for the market going forward. But Edahn, I want to come to you. Market acceptance, you're not getting out of this one.
Okay, so when you say market, you're talking about retail, you're talking about consumer market?
Retail. Our acceptance as an industry, not the
okay.
consumers.
So
the
let's
consumers have spoken. They want it.
Consumers are walking into the store today. Smart retailers know that they need to qualify them right off the bat. You can't try to sell natural and then say, oh, wait a second, your budget is smaller, so it doesn't work. You need to qualify them immediately. And it used to be in the past, what are you looking for? What's your budget? Now, What are you looking for? What's your budget? You know, does it matter? Are you looking for a particular type of diamond? Some retailers will walk through the story of that. So at the end of the day, consumers either know about it or learn about it in the store, and it's there. Smart retailers, as I said, are qualifying their consumers. Those that don't are missing out. I think the biggest issue today at retail is, are your customer a budget customer or more of an opportunity customer? If they're a budget customer, right, you walk in and you have $5,000 burning a hole in your pocket, so it makes a lot more sense to sell a lab-grown diamond because the margins there are insane. It's way past the gross margins, way past 60%, where it's around, 40% for a 1-carat diamond, natural diamond. So you make a lot more money. If, on the other hand, your client is opportunistic, right? I want to buy something. I don't know what my budget is. If I see something nice, so lab-grown will decrease your average transaction value. So these are two different markets. The first are going to benefit from lab-grown because they're going to make a lot more money, saying the same number of items and having a larger gross margin. The other type are going to miss out. In terms of the diamond industry itself, if we look upstream, I think that if you look at India, all of them, bar none, are with a foot in each industry. Those that are not are either diehards or waiting for a change. If you look at what is happening at the production level, so of course De Beers is in, Alrosa, for whatever its market sway is these days, is still dead set against it. They are kind of resigning to the fact that their clients are in, but they don't like it at all, and are angry at De Beers for doing this. But many growers are in a very tight position today. They are at nearly a cost plus situation. And one of the reasons for that is that there are really two types of growers: those that are investing in R&D and those that are not. Those that are investing in R&D are investing 15 to 20% of their revenue, which is a lot, in R&D. The goal there is to go past the jewelry industry and into high tech. That's the holy grail. It's a much bigger industry. You can make a lot more money. So the hope is that even though they're losing, or maybe they're losing money today, they'll make it, past that technological breakthrough or breakthroughs that are needed for that. Those that are just producing for the sake of producing, I don't see how they'll survive in the long run, because, as I said, this is an industry that's just generating an item with a decreasing price. And from that perspective, the only way to go is to take the route that Pandora, pardon me.
Bless you.
Sorry. To take the route that Pandora and Swarovski took. And they're not selling diamonds, they're selling a brand. So my 14-year-old daughter, she thinks Pandora is the S blink blink T. And
you can swear on these webinars.
So yeah, but think about it from the perspective of a company that is, a public company. They're selling an item that sells for a few $100s. Where do you grow? And you're the monster. You're the gorilla in the market. For them to now add a diamond, it gives them an excuse to sell in the 1,000 and 2,000 price brackets.
And for those customers who are Pandora customers to own a diamond.
Oh, absolutely. But Pandora is selling design, brand, quality of manufacturing, and the fact that they're constantly renewing their offerings, which means that if you see something and you like it, you have to buy it now. If you don't, because next month it won't be there.
It's seasonal.
And Swarovski is doing the same thing. it's the same kind of model. Nobody buys a Swarovski crystal. People are buying Swarovski jewelry, right? So they're going to become, I think they're moving towards in the jewelry industry to becoming a component more than anything else.
So Michelle, my take on it, it's still controversial because there are people pitting themselves for or against, right? And our industry historically does not embrace change.
I'm just thinking back to how we reacted when the internet first became
online,
a thing, and
right? Do you remember online, guys, and
oh my
e-commerce
God.
and
I'm not going to carry that vendor anymore because
we're
he's
going to
selling online
boycott
now.
any vendor who
Yeah.
did business online. I mean, it was crazy and insane. And look, 80% of luxury is still done in brick and mortar, right? At least if you're, I think that's.
I have an anecdotal story about the industry in that regard, and that when IDEX just went live and looking for new customers, they found that many diamond traders, especially in Israel, didn't have internet in their office. So they sold a bundle. Here's membership to IDEX, plus 1 year free internet with one of the local companies that was operating it. That was the way to sell, membership. So, and it's only 20 years ago.
I know, it was crazy, but I will say this, we get asked all the time from retailers, and we have a team who work, so the consultant hat goes back on, should I carry it? Should I not carry it? Should I be a purist and only sell natural? At the end of the day, you have to decide what's right for you and whether it's a story or not you want to tell. But I think you have to remember that if you choose not to, it is growing in the market and you're willing to give up that market share. And you're also willing to send your consumers to competitors. And if you're okay with that at the end of it all, then make your, decide you're only going to carry one. But I don't, and I said it earlier, I do not think you have to do one or the other. You can tell both stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, that's a really good point, Sher. I mean, it's like Peter Smith often says, you can't try to be everything to everyone. You need to decide what your brand is, what your selling proposition is, and stick to it. And right, if you decide LabGrown, you don't want that to be a part of your store, fine, but you're right, you're probably going to lose market share to the person down the road. But you could also look at it from the perspective of, well, I don't need to get into that if everyone else is into it too. I mean, you could also look at it from that perspective, like, well, I'm going to be different and not sell that because everyone else is. There are a lot of retailers who forewent Pandora back in the day for that very reason. And, a lot of them are still with us. They just said, that's not our market. That's a trend.
They regretted it. It's right.
Yeah. So I can tell you that in our panel, 100% of the retailers sell natural diamonds and 95% sell lab grown. So it's everywhere.
Exactly. And the other thing is, at some point, we should listen to the consumer. Like, we always want to decide what the consumer wants instead of going, guess what? The consumer's telling us that they want this product. They're okay with wearing their natural and diamond engagement ring and adding a lab-grown tennis necklace. Everybody's
Push
happy.
or pull.
Yeah, exactly.
Choices.
Yeah. And then there's another element that we're kind of ignoring, but it's a thing in India, and that's what our friend Pranay called the hybrid jewelry.
Yeah.
So the center stone is
combination,
and the side stones are natural. So what is this? Is it a natural? Is it a lab grown? No, it's a hybrid item, and it's out there.
Yeah, just got to call it out. That's what we're here for.
That's right. And you call it out, and if the consumer's happy with it, then they're happy. Let them make their purchase, right?
Absolutely.
The market's still evolving.
And you know,
so, yeah.
Sherry, you said you made a very interesting point, and it's the story. The retailer needs to know. Retailers know how to tell a story because that's how you sell jewelry. But I think the lab-grown industry in general needs to find its own story, and because the story of natural diamonds is that it's natural. It's long-lasting, 3 billion years in the making, yada, yada, yada. So, you can't say I'm the same, but just cheaper. You're not the same, you're different, and that's perfectly okay. But take your difference and make a thing out of it and build a story around that and move forward with that.
And Edahn, I feel like, and you can tell me if you've thought about this or had conversations, I often talk to my husband, Peter, as Michelle's brought him up several times. We talk about this. I feel like, too, is there an opportunity, and are we just glossing over it, that lab-grown diamonds might actually be capturing more market share for the disposable dollar than we would have otherwise had? Like, nobody talks about that. Yeah, see, I feel that way too.
So the question used to be, it's a good point. The question used to be, is it expanding the category or is it cannibalizing it? And the answer is yes.
Both. It's both.
Absolutely.
For sure.
I agree. I agree. But I mean, there are costume and bridge jewelry. They're a fast growing category over the last 2 or 3 decades. Nobody talks about it, but it actually brought more market share or exposure to the jewelry industry. And I feel like the lab grown category can do that as well.
It has. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a disruptor. It's a disruptor that has brought people back into the market for sure. It gives them that entry
Otherwise
point.
wouldn't have, right? Outside of their engagement ring.
Can't go backwards. So yeah, okay, we'll say yes.
Thank you all. This has been such a lively discussion. We have had so many questions come in, and we got a ton of questions even before the webinar started. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan to start asking some of the questions that came in.
Sure. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. That was a great discussion. And I've been sort of trying to pay attention to the main discussion and the discussion going on in the chat, because a lot of people have been actively commenting on the issue in the chat. Let me actually open up my chat again. There are a number of things that have been asked that you guys have already touched on or answered, but I think I'll start with the whole selling both lanes, being comfortable selling both lanes. How do you really, differentiate, but be able to sell both? Because I think that's something, going back to when I started back at National Jeweler, actually many years ago. I mean, jewelers have always been afraid of selling one thing and it's seeming like it's a detriment to another part of their inventory. Like back in when I first started, it was like Canadian diamonds versus diamonds from Africa. And, if I sell Canadian, will it make it seem as if the diamonds that I have, the other diamonds, that there's a problem with that? And it's just part of the nature of, I think, people in this business to, have that conflict, even if the consumer doesn't. So I think I'll start with you, Sherry. Just hearing it a lot in the comments and the back and forth, and also in questions we got ahead of time, which is how do you approach it as a jeweler and sell both lanes well without having either lane hurt each other, kind of create that hybrid, really?
Yeah, and Edahn touched on this a little bit earlier, but it's really about training. It's about training your staff, right? And this is a terrible story, but I had a retailer a customer came in for a natural over 2 carat marquee diamond with a $15,000 to $20,000 budget. They didn't have anything to show him. It was a young salesperson, young and new to the industry, and walks them right over. But let me show you this, 2 or 3 carat in the lab grown, and proceeds to make an $8,000 sale. That's a mistake, and that's a lack of training, right? First of all, if somebody comes in looking for a natural with a budget like that, you're going to find out more information and make an appointment for a follow-up and get those stones in. So it really is about training. It's training your team to understand the difference and how to navigate. That's where I think if people are bringing this in and they haven't done that, they're probably feeling, as Edahn said, the average retail sale go down. Now, I do have retail clients, as I'm sure it's other team members do, where we're seeing they carry both, and their average retail sales are not declining because they put in a good training program and they're navigating the 2 different stories. And in a lot of cases, they're allowing the customer to direct them, which is the best thing you can do.
I agree.
Me too. That was good. True.
Okay. I feel like you guys have really talked about pricing a lot, and we've had some discussion back and forth. But because it came up repeatedly, and specifically for you, Edahn, just how you see things shaking out in terms of the manufacturing side for lab grown, and whether or not you feel a lot of these companies are going to even survive.
For manufacturers, I'm just, as we're speaking, I'm pulling up my pricing charts. So from a manufacturing standpoint, it's still very profitable. I know that many manufacturers are complaining, but at the end of the day, I think there's a psychological element here, and it took me years to understand it. The diamond traders will tell you that they're losing money when they're not selling at the price they expect. That is not the same as selling for less than what you bought, or that you're with your expenses, etc. the truth is that they make very handsome margins, not as fat as they used to. And they're finding that one of the biggest mistakes is buying more rough than they really need, polishing a lot, and then sitting on a large inventory that's constantly devaluating. And if you understand the midstream's economics, you know that your stock is one of the most important factors in your business. So, and that allows you to get loans and credit, etc. So what they really want to do is get all these goods off the books as fast as possible. The downside is that you're providing it on memo, and then there is a glut. The market suffers from a glut. The other element is that sometimes one of the things that the diamond industry learned in 2008, when there were a lot of working hands layoffs, is to bring back skilled labor is very, very difficult. It's expensive and it takes a lot of time. So they learned their lesson, and now every time there is a slowdown, what they do is do everything they can to not lay off people. So they'll shorten the work week by a day, or have extended vacations. But if it's a major slowdown, what they do is they buy LabGrown just so people are working. So they buy the rough really cheap, and they don't really care about the outcome as long as these guys are working and they don't have to lay them off. But then once again, that adds to that glut that we see in the market, and it's a snowball effect. So I think that we spoke about it before we went online with this. I think that the ban that the diamond industry in India should really declare is on manufacturing lab-grown. Maybe that will protect their product a little bit, and manage their prices. Everybody's making money. I mean, everybody's making money. The only ones that are really hurting right now are the growers, because they're investing a lot in technology and improving their processes, etc.
Got it. Okay, let me just see. We are actually getting close on time. And let me just go through the questions because we've gotten a ton.
Can I jump in with one? more
Yeah,
thing?
please, Michelle, go ahead.
Edahn and Sherry and Avi, you can jump in on this too. I'm curious, what do you think the timeline is? Because I've heard discussions that we think that lab-grown diamond prices are going to kind of find a bottom. They're going to find a level where they kind of just fall to that level and stick. Like we saw, for example, with flat screen TVs. They were thousands of dollars then, and they've fallen down to like kind of like a certain level now. And you're right, like you can add features to some, better sound, better picture, whatever, to make them more appealing. What is the timeline, do we think, on these lab-grown diamond prices kind of finding their level? Because that's eventually what's going to happen, right? They're going to find their level. And it's going to stabilize. A year, 2 years, 5 years. What do we think?
So I think there are two elements here. One is the cost plus sort of floor. Nobody will sell below their cost. That's one element. The other element is, what are they going to do with it? I mean, are we just going to let the situation continue to deteriorate until, you are at a cost plus situation? Or will you try to address the problem and try to resolve it in advance? And I think that's the big question. I published several months ago a graph. I did a forecast on when loose diamond sales at retail in the United States will become 50%. And then first I did it for units, and I had a certain forecast, and it was just very clear. But when I did it by value, I had a graph that kind of went like this and then like this, because the price of lab-grown was just falling so quickly. I mean, you can buy today a 1 carat round VVS G color lab-grown diamond in India for under $200. And if you buy in great masses, it's closer to 120, 130, 140. Really, I mean, so it's a bulk sort of thing. So the prices can be very, very low. And then once again, it also tells you about, the need to move these goods off the book, and whatever it takes to do it, they'll do it. So
Do you think there'll be a consolidation and purging of some of these growers, and that could lead to more stabilized pricing?
absolutely.
Has to be.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of folks commenting about the historical precedent of cultured pearls and whether or not anyone feels there's any comparison to diamonds, or if it's just a completely different market and situation. Any thoughts on that?
So cultured pearls were the nightmare scenario that the diamond industry was looking at when they talking about 10 years ago, when it just became a thing. And the whole idea of approaching the government and saying, the US government saying, look, we need disclosure, this needs to be separated. It's because you talk with a lot of people, and every once in a while I'll talk with somebody, a woman that has a bunch of pearl necklaces and really, really likes them, and you tell them, how this is made, right? And you just point it out. It's like, if you take one pearl off and you sew it in half, there's a plastic ball inside. It's like, no, there isn't. It's like, well, but isn't it odd that all these pearls are they're so homogeneous, that they look so, I mean, this is not a product that happens in nature. Temperature goes up and down, sea movement. I mean, how does it happen that it's so unison? And they're surprised by that revelation. And that was really the scenario that scared the diamond industry. And that's why there was a lot of efforts put into, we are the natural diamond industry. And those guys, they have to say exactly what they are.
I think pearls have had ebb and flow in the marketplace, right? Barbara Bush wore them, and then everybody was buying pearls. And then nobody, the next president's first lady wasn't wearing them. And unfortunately, it is something, pearl strands, a lot of consumers associate with their moms or grandmothers, so it's not quite as appealing. I think the more fashion-forward pearl jewelry is doing better. And by the way, colored stone and pearl categories seem to be fighting, right, to keep having growth this year as opposed to the diamond category. So that's kind of pleasant to see.
And how many people know that there are lab-grown sapphires and lab-grown rubies, and how much disclosure do you get there? I mean,
that's right.
That the diamond industry in that regard, the natural diamond industry in that regard, was very proactive, and
Right.
and the lab-grown industry as well, to protect their product.
I think that we are just about out of time, but I did see a question again on cost for Edahn. They wanted to know, is the cost for 1 carat lab-grown diamond less than the grading report and cutting labor for the diamond? They really just want to
Natural?
nail down the cost.
So if we're talking about natural diamonds, the cost to grade, Avi can talk about IGI. I think GIA is about $100, and manufacturing, the cost of manufacturing is about $100 for a 1 carat diamond.
But for lab grown comparison,
For lab grown, the cost of manufacturing is the same. There's no, I mean, it's the same process.
okay. Well,
The
I
cost
think.
is the same.
Sorry, go ahead, Avi.
Avi, how much
No.
do you guys charge for a 1 carat certificate?
Less than $100.
Less than 100. Same for natural and lab grown?
No, difference. There is a difference.
Awesome. Yeah.
Because of the cost of the stone, we're sensitive to the market on that respect, but the labor is pretty much the same. Sometimes even more difficult on a lab grown because of the hues and the colors and things.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
We
well,
lost our moderator.
I do believe, I'm not sure what
Where'd she
happened. Was
go?
Michelle, did we lose Michelle?
Looks like we did.
Well, I think we're out of time anyway.
she
I
left in
want to thank
protest.
all of you for
She
your.
left
No, I'm not sure what happened with that. Maybe internet issues. But thank you all so much. Thanks to everyone for the lively
is.
chat. Oh, here's Michelle.
Coming back.
We're just wrapping things up, Michelle, if you can hear me, because we lost you there for a moment. Thanks to everyone in the chat and for the questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to as many questions as I just couldn't keep up with them, frankly. You guys had a lot to say, but I feel like our guests did a great job of, covering a lot of the ground that was being discussed in the chat. So thanks everyone, and thanks Michelle for doing a great job at moderating the discussion. We do have upcoming webinars for My Next Question, as well as just general webinars for Jewelers of America and for National Jeweler. The next one coming up for National Jeweler is a session on independent jewelers and modern tech, starting your store's next chapter. That's going to be held on October 4th, and you can see information about that at the National Jeweler website. For JA, we have an upcoming webinar with Jewelers Healthcare, basically talking about the service that they offer to Jewelers of America members with regard to that. So keep an eye out for those sessions. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today, and have a great day, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So much,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
Have a great day.
Susan,
Thanks for
we need
having
to keep
us.
the chat and then have an opportunity to answer to everybody.
I'm just going to
Yep.
say before we shut off here, I know there were a lot of questions. Everyone's email address is online, correct? So if anybody has any more questions for any of us, you can email me. I'll forward it where you want to go, michelle.graff@nationaljeweler.com. You can find Edahn, Sherry, and Avi. You can find us all online. If you have more questions, we'll be happy to answer them. I know there were a lot and we couldn't get to them all. And thank you.
It was great.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys. Thank
Agreed.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
guys.
Have a great week.
Take care.
Bye.
Be well.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.